This is Dateline News and Conversation. The show tonight is a continuation. It'll be a series with a show we did a few weeks ago with Alanna Hartzok. She wrote an amazing book. It's called The Earth Belongs to Everyone. It presents a whole new paradigm of how we look at the earth, how we look at property, how we look at taxes, how we look at economic equality. Now, economics is not a field that I have a great deal of understanding about, but I can understand very clearly the ideas that Alanna has put forward in her book and on our previous show, and we're going to continue that discussion this evening. Alanna, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, Alanna, first of all, can you do a brief review using the PowerPoint slides that you shared the last time, and then we'll go into a discussion that will take us from that into what we want to talk about tonight.
Okay, I'm going to put the PowerPoint up, correct?
Correct.
And, you mentioned that you didn't know much about economics. You know a lot more about it than you think you do. What happened was economics became like obfuscated. We're going to go into this. It became so that just a few, almost like a priesthood, that could understand it, and sort of like giving the impression that nobody else can understand these complex ideas. That was part of the corruption of economics, and we're really gonna go into that in this program. Let me start from the first slide here. So, war, peace, power, Henry George and Leo Tolstoy. We're going to briefly review from last session these economics of war and peace charts. Peaceful economy. There's people don't have any violent barriers or purchasing power barriers to the land and resources of the earth. We all need the earth to survive. We are earth creatures, and we create the wealth that we need. The food, shelter, and everything comes from labor on the earth. So in a naturally just and harmonious society, everyone has fair access to the gifts of nature to provide for their livelihood. So yes, this is indigenous wisdom, indigenous knowledge, indigenous knowing of our deep connectivity with Mother Earth. Now look at this one. See those guns? Those are where the points of violence begin. When the right to the earth, the natural right, is cut off by land grabbing, by enclosures, by real estate speculation and hoarding. This is the origin, this cutoff of the human beings from our planet as a birthright. Well, if you cannot find a job that's going to be able to, like increasingly in the United States and around the world, you can't find a job with enough wages to pay for your rent or your mortgage, well, you're going to be homeless. But if you have some sort of income, then the banks will give you a loan. The banks will give you a mortgage, which means dead hand, comes from that word. One of your hands is now dead from working for your own provisioning for life. It's dead because it's going to somebody else somewhere else. The product of your labor is going elsewhere, in this case, to banks, through mortgages, through loans, and ultimately odious debt, when the big banks of the planet loan to Africa, and the continuing increasing debt burdens of the African people and the people in the United States and elsewhere in the so-called developed world. So when people must pay rent for access to land, exploitation of labor begins. Because of this rent leak, people can't get capital without borrowing from the privilege fund lending system and paying interest. Privilege, by the way, means private law. Private law. So John Adams said a long time ago, there are two ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by the sword, and the other is by debt. Thinking Indian, wonderful, John Mohawk, academic, University of New York and Buffalo, and a Mohawk indigenous elder. In his essay, The Problem of the Modern World, he said, when land became a commodity and lost its status as provider and sustainer of life, Western civilization began its history of subjugation and exploitation of the earth and earth-based cultures. For nearly 5 centuries, people have been coerced from their land holdings. The problem in the English-speaking world has its roots in the 16th century. He's not talking about Christopher Columbus on this one. He's talking about the enclosures, a series of land privatization over several centuries that pushed the common people off of the common land. In England, this enclosures started in the 12th century onwards, accelerated significantly from the 1450s to 1640. Well, the land barons found they could make a little more income having sheep instead of people on their land. And then a major wave of enclosures from 1750 to 1860, culminating in parliamentary acts that privatized common lands for so-called agricultural efficiency, ending by the late 19th century. This process involved converting communal open fields and waste was just unused land, really, into privately owned consolidated farms with over 5,200 enclosure acts passed by the government between 1604 and up until 1914. Well, not any more common land left to enclose after that time. So Paul Livy, Jack Forbes are authors of these books, Columbus and Other Cannibals and Dispelling Wetiko. Now, this term Wetiko, very important word. It's describing a disease. It's the sickness of exploitation, has been spreading as a contagion for the past several thousand years. Well, he takes it way back, doesn't he? But this comes from a Native American word, this word Wetiko. And they were asking, what's with these European people coming in? They don't keep their word. They lie. They don't keep their promises to us, and they keep taking more and more of their land. And the men beat the women, and the men beat the children. What kind of people are these people? They couldn't understand the consciousness of the Europeans. European consciousness was already damaged by enclosures, by the way, and by exploitation and rich-poor gap. So that's a word I think is really important. So Wetiko consciousness is self-separated, it's divided, hierarchical, it's predatory, it's trauma-inducing, it's just plain ugly. And unity consciousness, which understands the relationship of all life, connectedness, it's unity in diversity, diversity and unity, but the two together balanced. It's circular, it's holistic, it's healing, it's beautiful, beauty, the true, the good, and the beautiful. Now back to the third of our 4 charts. This privilege fund where the few enclose, encapsulate, claim, grab the unearned income. This is important to understand. It's not earned, it's unearned. When you're making money from charging for the rights to the earth and you're making money from money, that's unearned. It's not contributing labor and production to making goods and services that people need. So this creates this growing privilege fund, private law fund, ruled by the few, the rules-based order. The United States rules-based order is not international law, carefully crafted. Well, this privilege fund and that consciousness of Wetiko wants more and more and more. And internal more, external more, colonialism, imperialism. We have then the capacity of the very rich to control the reins of government. And In the United States, we the people have never been engaged in foreign policy. We've never been invited. Our senators and representatives never call us into forums to discuss foreign policy. That has always been an elite domain. So the elites managed to get our taxpayer dollars to fund their wars, armaments, military industrial complex, foreign investments. Okay, foreign investments. Collectors of this privilege fund invest in land and resources in these so-called underdeveloped countries to quell protests. Investors call for military interventions. And you look at these wars, you just see over and over there land and resource wars, and the bankers are in there. So it's land, money, grabbing the whole way down, turtles all the way down. So this is where we have to focus. This is beyond left and right, this issue of land and money. This has been deeply hidden, this understanding. But once we understand it, we can shift the whole thing by a new form of democratic governance, because democracy has not brought us rights to our earth, to our land, to our resources. So this is a video, this is a documentary I highly recommend. It's a weaving of 10 or 12 different documentaries, the high points, called What I've Learned About U.S. Foreign Policy, The War Against the Third World. Frank Durrell put this together. He updates it. It's CIA covert operations and U.S. military intervention since World War II. What you didn't learn in school and don't hear on the mainstream media. You can find this for free, Frank Durrell's What I Learned About U.S. Foreign Policy, and view this documentary through the land and money lens, and it will hit you in the face over and over. These are land, resource, and banker wars,
Do you have
both
a link?
together.
Do you have a link to that documentary?
I didn't put it in the show here, but it's pretty easy to do a web search and internet search and find it.
Save me the time and trouble. If you can send me the link, I will post it in the description.
Oh, certainly. I'm happy to do so.
Okay.
Oh, this is global research, James Lucas and Michael Shazudovsky. The United States most likely has been responsible since World War II for the deaths of between 20 and 30 million people in wars and conflicts scattered over the world. I'm just about want to cry when I hear these things. This is my country doing this, my tax dollars. It's horrific, and you know about it. So here on the left, this terrible Wetiko consciousness, separative consciousness, consciousness that says we're going to rule and the other people are subhuman. And on the right, this beautiful image of a consciousness that understands that we're all connected with each other, with life itself, with the cosmos, with the universe. All the world's major religions are symbolized in this beautiful image on the right. Share the earth. I like to say warfare or earth share. That's really the question. So here's our fourth slide. Again, we're going to transform the privilege fund. Suddenly it looks very different. There's no war, there's no militarization, there's no imperialism. What have we done? We've redefined the goal, the purpose of governance as an earth rights democracy, as first and foremost, making secure everybody's fundamental rights to Mother Earth. The privilege fund is equitably returned to society. All that unearned income goes back to the people by the public collection of land and resource rents. That means tax policy based on the rent, the profit now privatized of the commons back to the people. Workers with their just economic opportunities restored can now accumulate capital through their own savings. Hey, come together and form cooperatives, cooperative ownership. Economic justice, abundance, and peace are restored. So, hope that's clear. No more guns.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. You've got more.
Okay, so this is pre-distribution uh, the rules of our relationship. So you have the money, land, and tax system is fairly established so that extreme wealth inequality is not possible. That's pre-distributive justice. You make sure it's set up fairly to begin with. You don't wait till it accumulates on the hands of a few and then you think and try to figure out how to claw back some of that wealth, but it just keeps escaping. Can't do it. So yes, we're going to go into another section now. Regis, did you want to make a comment at this point?
Well, I have a couple of things. Maybe you could take the shared screen down just for a moment and then put it back up
Okay.
momentarily. I
Okay.
yeah, I do have a couple of comments. I've been taking notes. Uh, First of all, um, already
I
some
might have
people.
trouble doing that. Go ahead. What?
I just leave it up there.
Yeah.
Uh, a couple of people have already asked for uh, your PowerPoint slides. Uh, I don't know whether you would agree or object to that, but it'd be great if you could send these to me, and then I could then send them to people who have asked, and I know more people will begin to ask for them because we're not going to let this die. I'm not going to let this die.
Oh, good.
And I think it's a really very critical topic that hasn't been discussed very much at all. A couple of comments.
Let me just
Uh,
say about that. I'm happy to send out my PowerPoint to anybody who asks for it. The one request I would make is that they please urge people to join our Earth Rights Movement, the International Union for Land Value Taxations, the IU.org. That's my one request in return for anybody can use them. Okay, go ahead.
okay, iu.org.
Yes, the THEIU.org.
Okay. Um, so I don't want you to answer this question now, but it's a question that have already raised before and again now, and we'll raise it again as we go forward. How do we shift to this new paradigm? I don't want your answer now, but I'm just putting it out there. Okay. I'm a very optimistic and idealistic person. I've never come across an idea that I didn't like, except some really evil, pernicious, terrible things. Um, so I, in all of my years now, I've learned to become a little more skeptical and realistic because I've hung my hopes many times on great transforming ideas that just never happened. This is one that I think has to happen. We're not just talking about peace. We're not talking about anti-nuclear. We're not talking about getting rid of wars and genocides and economic corruption. We're talking about fairness and equality based on everyone's right to Mother Earth. Now, you mentioned Wetiko. I'm very familiar with that because my good friend Dean Henderson, who lives in South Dakota and has been very close to the Lakota Sioux all of his life, he has constantly mentioned this concept of Wetiko. Uh, it is a sickness, it is exploitation, and it's their version of the white man's lies and exploitation of the earth, which the indigenous people, not only the Native Americans, but different indigenous people the world over, consider the earth to be mother, to be sacred, that we're all a part of it, and you have to treat it uh, properly, or we don't survive. So I just wanted to underline that and give a shout out to my friend Dean Henderson for making that very clear on so many of the shows that we've done. Um, I don't want to go on a whole lot further because this is your whole show, really. Um, I I really love the idea um, about labor, and labor is the source of wealth. Uh,
Labor
when
on land.
labor and land, but when it's exploited, as you said, when both really are treated as a commodity, now we've destroyed the balance. And this is something that I think a lot of people now should be becoming acutely aware of because of the economic problems, not only in the United States, but all across the West. So, um, Alanna, let's move on.
Oh, okay. With your good to know about your friend Dean in South Dakota. Now, in describing a tax policy approach, I'm not saying everywhere for everybody. The native lands and the that still available to native people in the United States for interest. Let them decide how to fairly share their land. It may be some more traditional system and not the kind of tax thing I'm talking about that works for highly developed countries. But that's what I'm saying. There are other ways than the main way I present, but the main universal ethic is sharing the land. So natural law here, earth wisdom. The equal right of all men and women to the use of land is as clear as their equal right to breathe the air. It's a right proclaimed by the fact of their existence. For we cannot suppose that some men and women have a right to be in this world and others do not. Now, that's our great political economist, Henry George, and we're going to learn next about how his teachings were corrupted. So, we also wanted you at this point to talk something about the Crimea coastal real estate, Regis, that situation there.
Well, I'm very happy to do that. I've been coming to Crimea in Russia since 2016. I came again in 2018 and 2019, and I've been living here now since March of 2020. It's coming up on 6 years. For anybody that thinks that the Russian economy is in the tanks and has been destroyed or diminished by Trump's sanctions and by the war in Ukraine, they need a lesson in reality. And I can tell you this, I have been amazed. And anybody who's come here from the United States or elsewhere, you'd have to be blind not to see the development and construction going up everywhere. I mean, construction of highways. I mean, construction of new apartment buildings, construction of new office and, it's shopping areas. It's happening everywhere and right here in Yalta. But the thing that disturbs me most, Alanna, is that these wealthy people, they're mostly all Russian now because of sanctions and the difficulty to get here because Russia is conceived as an enemy, because Russophobia is on steroids. The investments are coming from wealthy Russians. And I didn't think there were that many wealthy Russians. I thought most of these people here were poor. What's happening here in Crimea on the coast, and I live in Yalta on the coast, is these wealthy people, and I'm sure they're not just individuals, I'm sure they're banks, investment companies, are buying up land that used to be free and available to us to access the sea. There are many areas now that we cannot approach. They're cordoned off by walls, and there are fewer and fewer pieces of land where ordinary people can access. What's also happening because of this development, views, turnouts, being able to see the sea are being obstructed now by these multi-story buildings that not only block the view for people like myself, but also block the views of people who have apartments or condominiums that used to have a view to the sea, but now somebody's built this building, this monstrosity that denies them the views they once enjoyed. For me, it just shows you the power of money, the greed, and the sense of entitlement that if I can afford it, I can buy it. Tough luck for you. I am very seriously concerned about this development that's happening now in Crimea they've never experienced before. I suppose it's like everything in the Mediterranean, everything on the Riviera. If you had money, you bought it up, and then it was yours, and access was denied. So that's what I have to say about coastal real estate here in Crimea.
This is so important to hear what's happening under your nose there with your perspective. Same thing, my colleagues report Costa Rica, you name it. The prime real estate is going into the hands of the few. Uh, Lagos, Nigeria, this huge megapolis. I've been there. Poor Lagos. It's getting a little better, but just a terrible place to live. But it's on the coast there. Uh, but you know what? They've enclosed the sand, the beaches, and that hot, humid city of Lagos. The people do not have any access to the Mother Earth of the ocean to go swimming on a sweltering hot day. So, what's the difference now? It's rich poor gap worldwide, isn't it? And it breaks my heart to see this land speculation, land grab happening there in Crimea. This is why, as you'll see as we go along in these next set of slides, we in the West, United States, and people in Russia, we need this third way that has a market economy without this gross rich poor gap, which you're seeing formed there. So here's what happened.
Well, if I can make one more comment before we move
Please
on
do.
about Crimea, what's been happening here is the same damn thing that's happening everywhere, including in the United States, is
Yes.
because of what's happening to the ownership of land, to the gentrification of cities. What happens is the rent is going out of sight. What used to be affordable here in Yalta, now because of the growth and the development, rent is going up and up and up. You have to be very wealthy to even own an apartment, much less a house. And that's Yalta, which is a prime location. But now it's happening up and down the entire Black Sea coast, from top to bottom, based on these wealthy people that are buying up the land, and it's forcing up rent and ownership for everybody else.
Regis, this is happening worldwide, as you probably know. I moved out of the San Francisco Bay Area because of too high housing and rental costs. I didn't think I was ever going to be able to afford something the size of a little garage for my family if I stayed there. And a penalty would be working the rest of our lives to pay for it. So I moved back home to South Central rural Pennsylvania near this pretty well known town in Gettysburg where the Civil War happened. And I was able to buy a nice little house and a nice little property. I couldn't buy that today. And I moved back in 1990. There was never homelessness in my rural county of 140,000 people. Now there's homelessness popping up everywhere. My good friend's daughter's family is now thrown out of her apartment building because they wanted to increase the rents on everybody, living in an old recreational vehicle that they had a hard time trying to find a place to park. That's a family of five with a 2-year-old baby. That's my friend. So there you go. This is urgent. The housing problem, Regis, is the land problem. The reason the market is not working to provision good affordable housing like it does to provision good affordable computers is because the house is connected to the land and the land is treated as a market commodity. So here we're going to do our quick economics.
Let me
Yeah.
jump in with a comment if I can about Russia,
Yes.
about Russia,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
a holdover from the Soviet Union, from communism. Most people own their own apartments. Most people own their own homes. It was that sense of equality, that sense of commune, which is a word that is like anathema in the United States and the West. You mentioned commune or communism or Soviet a type lifestyle. This is anathema. But I have to tell you, It's one of the wonderful things that still exist here in Russia. But I'm telling you, in all honesty, it's beginning to change. Younger people want more money, they want better jobs, they want better houses. They probably sold the apartment they once owned outright and now have had to purchase something else. And that means mortgage, rent, it really doesn't belong to them. And with that comes a lack of the sense of the commons. Another word for the commons is a right to Mother Earth. It belongs to everybody. Now, you talk about this in the United States, and you're anathema. And yet here, Alanna, I have to tell you, there are parts of where I live, and I've seen it in Moscow and St. Petersburg and other major cities, incredibly clean. Even the local neighborhoods, they're spotless. People wouldn't think of throwing trash uh, or throwing cigarette butts onto the streets. I saw one man accosted by a good friend of mine for taking a cigarette butt and crushing it against the wall at a bus stop. And she accosted this guy and just she called him out. What are you doing? Don't you understand? Don't you have any respect for this area, for these people? And so I just wanted to sneak that in, where it's still prevalent almost everywhere I've been, but it is changing. And that's unfortunate because of this commitment to the things you're talking about: private property,
And
ownership,
yeah,
inequality.
private profit. Private property is something that just shows your land title means you have use rights to a particular area. It's the private profiteering. Uh, so listen, Regis, I traveled through the Soviet Union for a few weeks when I was a young woman back in 1969. And I agree with what you're talking about. I mean, economic human rights, the people's basic needs were met for everybody. There was some price to pay. The price was some freedoms, and the price to pay was some inefficiencies when you had too much centralized command control because you didn't permit market forces at all. So what this is about is a third way. It's yes, the land ethically is a commons. Now, United States, a bad word is not community land trusts. So community land trusts are a way to share a land base. What the tax policy that I'm working for, coming out of the teachings of Henry George, and before then, back to hundreds of years before then, he rediscovered a truth. What I'm working for would use public finance to essentially make all the land and resources a commons again. So you could not profit from land and resource control, only from production of goods and services. So now here we're going to go into the corruption of economics. The original economics, land, labor, capital, goes back at least in the last our millennium to the physiocrats, the doctors of the kings of France when they were asked by I think it was King Henry the 14th. They saw a growing unrest from the people. They were getting concerned. The people were getting very upset. Well, they said, you physicians study how blood flows through the body. Maybe you can study how wealth flows through our land. So these smart guys looked at it, and guess what they came up with? They said, well, you're going to have a bloody revolution if you don't solve the land problem. And you better do an impôt unique. I don't know French much, but that means the single tax, impôt tax unique, single. You better start taxing the land that you all own, you aristocrats, nobility, instead of taxing the labor of your people that are growing impoverished. So this is the origin of classical economics, three factors. You'll see why this is important. So land means all the earth. It was a term that meant all the gifts of nature, meaning water, minerals, the air itself. Get it? It's all nature produced. That's the term, land. And the return to land, return being whoever holds the land as private property, exclusive for themselves, they get the rent. It increases as the land values grow. When privatized, it is this unearned income, this phrase that we talked about earlier slides. Whoever can grab this land and resource rent gets the power and control. So those are three pictures just showing land. Now, labor is the factor used in the most understandable way. It's the return to is wages. And this is an earned income, your wages, your wage labor, whether it's mental or physical labor. This is, you work for it. Now, the third term is capital. It's the tools of production. The return in classical economics is interest. We're not even thinking money yet. We're just thinking land, labor, capital. The return that if you own capital, you get interest, a shovel, a building, any machinery. Now, look at that hammer. It's metal and wood. If you're charging too much to rent your hammer because I don't have a hammer, well, then maybe me and my friends are going to figure out how to make a hammer out of some metal and some wood, and we'll be able to have our own capital there. We won't have to buy it from you. So properly constituted, capital becomes affordable to all because it can't really be a monopoly. As long as people have access to raw materials, anybody can make capital. So you can't have a market monopoly. So labor. Okay, labor on land, which is again gifts of nature. That's what creates the capital. Think a shovel, hammer. So the primary factor is labor on land. Capital as tools now. We're not talking money capital, we're talking wealth used to produce more wealth. Capital as tools enables more wealth to be created by labor. Basic needs can be secured with minimal capital. Think the frontier times in the United States, indigenous people. We're all indigenous if you go back far enough. We use the gifts of nature to provision all of our basic needs, or else Regis and I wouldn't be here today talking. So let's
You
go
know,
on here and not get
yeah,
what?
I'd like to mention something else about Russia
Yeah,
and the holdover from the Soviet Union.
yeah.
Um, these people learned how to survive with very little. Almost everybody had a garden, handmade tools, shovels that were handmade. It's really incredible how ingenious these people still are. The older generations, certainly anybody that was born in the 50s or 60s, have learned that. And you see it again today. And it, I always think about, something, if the collapse comes to the United States, like happened to the Soviet Union in the 1990s,
Yes.
the American people will not be able to feed themselves. They will not be able to survive. All hell will break out.
I agree. That is a probable future scenario, Regis, if we don't get a handle on this and quick. So now we're looking at what happened when we got neoclassical economics. We went from classical land labor capital, right, to when Henry George came forth with his book, Progress and Poverty. Instant bestseller. He became very well known, giving lectures everywhere. People were really getting educated about the land problem and what to do about it with shifting the tax base onto the land value. He became a threat. Some say that Henry George was more a threat to the United States elites than Marx was. Get a handle on that. Everybody's heard of Marx. They haven't heard of Henry George as much. So what the elites did was they funded universities, emerging academic economics departments to corrupt economics. There's a book on this, Corruption of Economics, and made only two factors. They obscured the key factor of land. Neoclassical, what we have now, neoclassical, neoliberal, same thing. Economics has only two factors, labor and capital. The land, the earth resources, was made a subset of capital. So now you see the earth is under the hammer. When the factor of land is reduced to a subset of capital, what happens to this concept of rent? Earned income, unearned income, rent as community created, as a commons, the land value, community and nature created belonging to the people as a commons. How do you get rid of that understanding, that clear perennial truth? You just use the shenanigans of language and your money power. And so what happens to the land and the rent? Verschwindet, one of my favorite German words. Rent magically and perhaps conveniently disappears from the economic lexicon and praxis. There's no more discussion. Who should own the earth? Who should get the profit? That's you academic economists in the United States, if they've ever heard of Henry George in a textbook, it's, oh, he's some agrarian economist talking about land. It's no longer relevant. It's been cut out, obscured, and I call it the intellectual crime, Regis, of the last century. Beginning of the 1900s, this intellectual crime happened. Yeah, there you go. That's a crime scene. Corruption of economics. Who would have pulled such a trick on the promising science of political economy just at the point when it, with Henry George's economics, have found a way to structure a market economy that would be fundamentally equitable in its distribution of wealth. Cui bono? Who done it? So get a hold of Mason Gaffney, others, Corruption of Economics. Now, what I'm running through here, I learned in a 5-week course at the little nonprofit called Henry George School of Social Science, based in New York, but I was in the San Francisco branch, Regis. This was a free little 2 hours a week for 5 weeks, and I wanted to understand the root causes of poverty, wealth inequality, and war. And by the end of that, I had what I call my economic enlightenment. Instead of teaching this and learning this in 10 hours like I did, I'm trying to get it into like a few minutes with you, Regis. But this chart is one to study. This chart shows what we call the law of rent, that rent factor, the unearned income, increases faster than the return to labor and production, and that the taxes are falling on labor and production where they should be taken off and shifted to the unearned income, from the earned income on the people to the unearned income of this land rent. That's what this shows. Now, this is sort of a generic chart that we've been compiled after looking at how this works in a number of countries. And probably some of the best work was at looking at Australia's distribution of wealth over, and you can again you can see this about anywhere. You could probably see it in African countries over 100-year period. This happens to be 1910, 2010. So the yellow is this unearned income, the rent. Do you see how the yellow at the top over 100 years keeps increasing? The land rent keeps growing. Therefore, the profits of those who own land and resources keep growing. The red orange is the taxes. You start out with most of the wealth going in the blue, which is the earnings, the earned income, labor and production, working. And you have a little bit of rent, the yellow, and you have some taxes. But what keeps growing? The taxes, the red keeps growing on the backs of the blue, which is shrinking now because now taxes are taking from wages and production. What keeps growing is the rent. Does that make sense, Regis? Because I have one more point to make on the
Yeah,
side.
absolutely. I mean, it's very clear what's
Yay!
happening.
This is the key to an economic enlightenment. Well, this is the key to understanding how the wealth inequality grows. And then the other key is to what to do about it. Now, I'm going to use the same chart to show what to do about it. Take the tax off our backs. We're earning it. I worked, I grew those vegetables in my backyard. don't come and take them away. That's where this idea of taxation of theft comes in. But if I worked and grew my garden, who has the right to come in and grab my vegetables? Not my neighbors and not my government. Take the tax off the backs of those who are working. Okay, what's that going to do to my wages? My earned income? You're going to stop stealing from me by taxing me. The blue's going to increase. What's going to happen to the yellow? I'm going to shift the tax base onto the land and resource rent, onto the unearned income, which is accumulating in the hands of the few. In the United States, we have 400 people with as much wealth as 50% of the population. My friends' families are becoming impoverished. Many of us are on the edge. It's got to change. If we don't figure out a way beyond the old right and the left, those in the yellow are just going to get it all, and we're going to die because we're going to end up killing each other in a bloody civil war. We have to think this through and come to a policy that's going to lead us forward. So that yellow, when you shift the tax base onto the unearned income, the land and resource profits, that disappears. That disappears. There's no more unearned income. That is the tax base. That yellow becomes the tax base.
Can I
The
can I
blue
jump in?
increases. Huh?
Can I jump in and make
Yes.
a couple of comments?
Oh,
Uh,
please.
what you're saying really makes absolute sense. But I look at myself, for example. I paid taxes all of my life. I paid taxes on everything I bought, from my car to cigarettes. I don't smoke anymore, but a long time ago I did. I pay taxes on almost everything, including food. And now that I'm retired, they even tax my bleep, bleep, bleep retirement, Social Security. I have to
Bleep,
pay
bleep, bleep
taxes.
for sure.
And so for people like me, we basically understand that they're robbing us blind. The government, and those that are benefiting, those extremely wealthy people up there in the yellow, are benefiting off of my earned income, including in my freaking retirement.
And guess what? Me too.
And guess what? I think it's time for the pitchforks to come out and to frighten all those people in the castle that have been looking down on us for centuries and saying we're coming back for it all.
Well, Regis, I get your point, but you used to be a priest, and for some reason, I think maybe you believe in thou shalt not kill.
Oh,
So
I do.
let
No, no, wait a minute.
oh,
I'm not talking about killing them. I'm just talking about scaring the bejesus out of them. We've all got pitchforks and we're coming for the castle. We've already crossed the moat. I want them to run hightail and get the hell out of there so they can save their lives. I don't want to kill them. Not really.
well, good. I'm glad we clarified this, Regis. I don't want a bloody civil war either. So, thou shalt not kill, right? But the power to tax is the ability to create or destroy. And destroy often does look like killing. So we want a public finance policy, which is our relationship of we the people to governance itself, to the payment for the provisioning of our needs that we have in common: education, libraries, good roads, all these common infrastructures that help facilitate our civilization's provisioning of goods and services.
So,
You can't have fair trade if you have lousy roads.
yeah,
Okay.
let me interrupt just for a minute. We're coming up on an hour, and
Oh,
I don't want to go beyond an hour because that's really too much for most people to take.
yeah.
How do you see the proper way to conclude this without having to, make it look too abrupt? I'd rather not do
Okay,
that.
let me see what else lies ahead with the slides here. So we have Henry George says it's not enough that men should vote. It's not enough that they be theoretically equally before the law. They must have liberty to avail themselves of the opportunities and means of life. They must stand on equal terms with reference to the bounty of nature. That quote by Henry George might be now. Now we go into how we build this public finance, what we're going to tax, what we're going to not tax. And then I was going to go into the relationship between Henry George and Leo
I
Tolstoy, but I
wonder,
might want to, yeah,
I wonder if we could start there the next time, Alanna. How do we
yes,
build it? How do we build it? Because that's the question that I asked earlier. It's the question
yes,
I'm going to keep asking. Look, I'm buying what
yes,
you're saying. I think a lot of
yes.
people who are going to watch this are going to buy what you're saying. But the question every single one of us has is, okay, how are we going to do it? So
Well,
could we start right there the next time?
let me have a couple thoughts here. There's these two quick ones on how to do it, but then how to do it sort of can go down a rabbit hole of some technicalities. I'm trying to present a very big picture and then really take maybe a whole session just to like how do we really do it, how has it been done to varying degrees in varying places. There are models. We're not talking about something that hasn't happened. We want it to happen on a much larger scale now. So let's next time. And the reason I'm so interested in the Henry George Leo Tolstoy is to really present how inspired Leo Tolstoy was with Henry George, and how uh, bringing forth this knowledge about the great Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy and the great political economist Henry George, and their great respect for each other, is a way to bridge Russia and the United States. And I
Oh,
have an idea at the end of how we can build this beautiful bridge of power soft power, ideas. It starts with ideas. How that idea with this bridge of Henry George and Leo Tolstoy could be used to build world peace between these superpowers. So that's where I wanted to go. I'd still like us to start to look at the issue of how you begin to use this policy. Let's do some of that next time. Let's then go into Tolstoy Henry George, get that rolling, and then let's go deep into how to implement the policy, the following. How's that sound for you?
no, that sounds great. Um, this is very enlightening, and it's something you've learned this over your lifetime. It's not enough to say it once, because the theory and the philosophy behind advertising, behind propaganda, is repetition, repetition, repetition. You can't say it once. Now, I've been at times ridiculed for repeating the same idea over and over and over again. And I keep saying, no, I'm in the same business, and people like me are in the same business as advertisers and propagandists. If we want to fight that system, it's not enough to say it once. And I think you've probably learned that over your career. You've talked to so many people, have repeated the same basic concepts over and over again. Now, uh, you and I are trying to do it on my platform, and perhaps other people will pick it up and begin using social media as a new basis, a new platform for sharing these ideas. Um, Alanna, if
Just
you're,
this movement, it's not I've been, yes, 50 years of my life since I had this economic enlightenment. It's been ups and downs and highs and lows, but I have persisted, as have a number of my colleagues who were young when they got with this, and now they're older like me. But we do have numbers of young people coming into the movement. We do have young people savvy in social media, and we do have a small but mighty movement worldwide. So
and
all the seeds are there to through your wonderful program, Dateline, and bringing this forward, we can keep watering the seed here.
you said something that is extremely important. You mentioned the word movement, and I have maintained through all of my work going back some 20 plus years as an activist, as a filmmaker, a documentarian, uh, as a podcaster now for the last 6 years or so, that my purpose and the purpose of people like me who are doing shows like this is twofold. It's number one, to educate and inform people, not with 3-second sound bites, not with 3-minute little video clips that are really designed to excite people, to aggravate people, to turn them against each other, to get them arguing. The purpose is to educate, educate, and that takes conversation like this and debates. And the second point, and it's really should be the goal of everyone like me, is to create a movement. Because without a movement, nothing happens. And Alanna, I have to tell you, I've been highly critical of all of these experts, these influencers that are getting millions and millions of views and tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of viewers and subscribers. Their goal, obviously, is not to create a movement. It's just to keep repeating the same stuff over and over again, but without creating the movement. And this is what you've been working at your entire life. We're gonna dig down deeper into this as we continue to go forward, because I really anticipate doing a series of shows with you. It is about getting younger people involved. How do you do that? Social media is where they live. That's where their content comes from, but it can't just be content. It's got to be content with the purpose of educating and drawing them in to a movement, because only a movement can bring about change. That's my feeling.
I totally agree.
So, Alanna, I didn't want to end this thing abruptly, but we're going to pick it up right here where you left off on now beginning to change the paradigm. We're coming up into the holiday season. Uh, it does make things a little complicated, but for me, after the new year, uh, even though here in Russia from January 1st for about 2 weeks, everything shuts down except the internet and my show, which I do in the evenings, I can keep doing that. So we'll look forward to doing it very early, uh, perhaps the first week in January, if that's okay with you.
That's just fine. I'm so happy to do it and to be with you, these thousands of miles away, but of one mind, one spirit here. Thank you, Regis.